Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, reminding you that on Sunday, November 17th, here in New York, we will be doing our 14th commentary roast. And the roastee this year, the man whom you cannot roast, and yet we are going to, is Natan Sharansky, the greatest living Jewish hero. How do you roast the greatest living Jewish hero? Go to commentary.org/roast to find out details on how to get tickets or tables to this singular annual event that everybody loves. And that's just not me saying it. It's our big moment of the year, and it is a barn burner. So the roast of Natan Sharansky, Sunday, November 17th, here in New York City, commentary.org/roast. I want to say hello to my fellow hosts here, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And our media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Commentary gets results. Amazingly enough, Kimberly Cheadle, the director of the Secret Service, resigned yesterday. We said she needed to, and she did. So I don't know why we can't take credit. I'm taking credit. Otherwise, she would have just stayed right there forever. So good luck. Good work, everybody. Good work on securing that resignation. Anybody have anything to say about Cheadle's resignation?
I have a couple of things to say. The first is that in Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas's note on the resignation, he didn't mention the attempted assassination of Trump, which is ridiculous. And instead it was filled, this note, with encomium about Cheadle and how wonderful she is. It's complete ham-fisted response to her resignation. And I think will continue to raise questions about the conduct of the Secret Service. The other big news is that there's going to be a bipartisan congressional investigation into the shooting. And I think this is really important. And I think one of the reasons it's important is the FBI investigation coming from within the government will be questioned because of all of the different theories that are out there. And so it will be good to have a congressional inquiry as well. And I think we're going to find out really disturbing things. I say that because after Cheadle resigned yesterday, we learned that the Secret Service is now encouraging Donald Trump's campaign to no longer hold outdoor rallies. And this is crazy. It's not like Donald Trump invented the outdoor rally. The outdoor political rallies have been going on for a long, long time. Up until July of 2024, the Secret Service was capable of protecting the candidates who held these rallies. And what? Now they just can't? It only raises more questions.
By the way, it's not just Mayorkas who issued a statement praising Cheadle to the skies. Joe Biden issued a statement praising Cheadle to the skies. As a leader, it takes honor, courage, and incredible integrity, the president, quote unquote, wrote, to take full responsibility for an organization tasked with one of the most challenging jobs in public service.
Now, Biden did mention the assassination attempt.
That's right.
So at least he had the honesty to admit that failure.
Well, the disturbing element of this is not just that we know two things. One is that Trump and his team asked for more protection and were denied it. You pointed out yesterday that Benny Johnson, the chairman of the January 6th committee, wrote a piece of legislation that said that had it been passed into law, Trump would have been denied all Secret Service protection on the grounds that he had been convicted of a felony. And the third is, and this apparently is unquestionable, that while Trump did not get a sufficient detail in a outdoor location, Jill Biden had 12 Secret Service agents protecting her at an event the same day, raising questions as to whether her detail ate into his detail. And that is going to go very hard, and it suggests why the tone of these, not to be, again, excessively conspiratorial, they do not want Cheadle mad at them, Mayorkas or the Bidens. They are trying to keep her within the tent. Ordinarily, you would say, I demand your resignation. I'm appalled at this behavior, blah, 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 blah. They are pouring honey over her.
There are two reasons for that, and they're both typical of how this administration functions. One, it's Jill Biden who made sure she got that appointment because Cheadle had been on the vice president's detail, was considered a loyal agent. Jill Biden is the one who pushed for her to be named the head of the Secret Service. The other is that Joe Biden cannot fire a single incompetent person who works for him ever. And the only reason she resigned is that she was absolutely dissembling, dishonest, and extremely defensive during her hearing. And there was no way. She had Jamie Raskin, hardly a right-wing radical, and Comer both calling for her resignation immediately after her testimony. There was no way for her to stay. But Mayorkas is another one who he's her boss. What is he still doing there given the border situation? So I think the Bidens, as we've discussed many times, Joe Biden does not like to fire anyone. And we are yet to see how much influence Dr. Jill had on the appointment of others beyond Cheadle in this administration.
But I think to John's point here, I suspect you're right, John, that she knows too much about the chaos and the bad policy and whatever other shenanigans have led the Secret Service to this pretty pass. And much better to have her not resenting you if you are Biden or Mayorkas at this point.
What we know is that there was some kind of a Praetorian Guard system at work in the White House, in the sense that Biden was clearly much more infirm than even we thought over a longer period of time. And there are a limited number of people who know the extent to which that is true. We may not hear from them. Democrats are desperately trying to turn the page to make it as though Biden was president sometime in the 19th century, and that everything that happened over the last 3.5 years is no longer an issue because he's out and Kamala is in. The press is going to be a willing handmaiden to that effort, and therefore it is going to be left to the investigators in the House and Senate and this bipartisan commission. The bipartisan commission now is going to be compromised because it's not going to want to. The Democrats on the bipartisan commission have every reason to slow roll this investigation so that stuff doesn't come out before November that implicates Kamala Harris. Again, I am the least. I don't even think this constitutes a conspiracy. I think what we're talking about is clearly real and clearly true, and they're going to have to be asking people all kinds of questions about what the Secret Service was up to over the last 6 months, and not just what happened on July 13th. Because what happened to get to this pass is the story. Yeah. Why were they relying so heavily on local law enforcement? Don't they need to quiet the Americans who do think that somehow people in Washington were involved in the hit? Now, maybe you can't. Maybe the lesson of the Kennedy assassination is there's no way to prove the negative. You'll never work. It'll never work. But you have to try in order to create a historical record that is accurate, number one, and number two, so that those people can be fought back against on behalf of the Americans who are not paying that much attention and are easily swayed to believe that, people in Joe Biden's ambit wanted Donald Trump assassinated, which is not a good thing for Americans to think. It increases our divisions. It makes things crazy. It foments and encourages possible future violence as retaliatory. So they need to do a good job on this. And again, like brown-nosing Kimberly Cheadle is not a good opening sign, it strikes me, about what's going to come down the pike here. You're muted.
This is where the separation of powers is a good thing, once again, because what you're describing are the interests of people within the executive branch. But Congress, even Democrats in Congress, I don't think have the same priorities. And I do think they will try to get to the heart of the matter here and figure out what's wrong and figure out how to improve the Secret Service. Nothing may come of it, but I do think we'll have a pretty damning report. You're right, probably after the election, but I'm happy to see that both Republicans and Democrats agreed that, trying to kill Donald Trump is a big problem. If you had asked me that,
might not have done your job. Right?
If you had asked me that 6 months ago, I would say, oh gosh, they'd be polarized over that. But in this case, they're like, no, we need to figure out what went wrong here.
We also need to talk about this outdoor rally, a Secret Service recommendation that Trump no longer have outdoor rallies, because again, in the world in which we are developing into, a low trust society, that just looks like they're trying to help Harris, right? Trump has these rallies, people come to them, the one in, was it Michigan or Ohio with J.D. Vance? There were 30,000 people at that rally.
Well, think of the Wildwood rally in New Jersey.
Yeah.
A couple months ago. Yeah. Huge crowd in New Jersey.
So
outdoors.
That's the way he likes to campaign. And that's his secret sauce. And they're like, no. I'm sorry. You really,
it's also
that. You shouldn't do that anymore. It's like, oh, really? You mean like Harris isn't going to go to the Darlington 500 or do what, all presidents? I mean, that's just like, oh, it'd be really good. Just go inside. Why don't you go to the basement? Go into your basement for a while.
That's an admission of failure.
But I'm saying it's more malign than that.
Yeah, but it's also
an advantage away from the person who is running against, who is part of the party that is running for re-election from the White House.
But they've also tried to put him in jail. So and strip him from the ballot.
Right.
So in the list of things, yeah, I agree, it's on there, but it's ranks pretty low.
But also, wittingly or not, it's a kind of challenge to Trump. Trump is the guy who stood up after being shot and said, "Fight, fight." He's the guy that God is protecting. He fears no man. He cannot take this advice from.
Well, reportedly, the campaign is looking into new indoor venues.
So that's
look. I mean, we have 100 days left, and maybe he'll have an outdoor rally by the end. But as of now, it seems like the campaign is responding to what the Secret Service is saying because of the potential security threat.
And maybe because they have no confidence that the Secret Service can protect him.
I certainly don't have any confidence. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, it's a very interesting political wrinkle. And we, of course, are in a moment of unbelievable and interesting political wrinkles. Kamala Harris had her first rally yesterday, indoor rally in Milwaukee, gave a speech. It's fine. To hear people speak, it was Pericles' funeral oration. To hear some people talk about what it was, or or the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V. I mean, this is the level of grading on the curve that has already started with Harris. But that's her superpower. Her superpower is she is going to have a media completely in the tank, and they are not getting out of the tank until November 6th. Which I think gets to Abe's point about whether or not they will actually ask her any tough questions and whether or not she will actually have to respond substantively to matters that presidents have to deal with. The initial indications are that they have overdosed on Kool-Aid, and that the tone of even the sort of flat repertorial stuff that's supposed to come even is giddy. It's giddy in its excitement and enthusiasm, and can't deny that it's a new story. It's new. It's fresh. It's something exciting, and she didn't screw up her first big appearance. She didn't say anything interesting. I would say she didn't indicate any new direction. It's too early for that. The only thing that's really going to indicate what direction she's going to go in as a substantive matter is whom she picks as her Veep, I think. But
Well, I think she has indicated what direction she's going to go in. She's now given 2 speeches, one to the campaign headquarters on Monday, and then yesterday's speech to the rally in Wisconsin. We hear less of Donald Trump as a threat to democracy in these speeches, and more, I know Donald Trump's type. So playing up Trump's character, the fact that the New York jury found him guilty, and contrasting that with Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor. So we can see that the Harris campaign is trying to define her as a law and order type who is going after Trump's lawlessness and chaos and bad character. And then on the domestic side, it's extremely vague, but what you can kind of glean out of the vapor is she's more liberal than Biden. And she's talking about completing Build Back Better. She wants entitlements for childcare, more health care. And I think that's of a piece with what we know about her. She was the most liberal senator before her run in 2020. When she ran in 2020, she embraced the whole menu of left-wing policy positions, from decriminalizing border crossings to the Green New Deal to Medicare for all. And I was just reminded on Twitter X yesterday that in the 2019, she was giving some interview with CNN, and they asked her about her support for Medicare for all. And the interviewer said, that would mean the abolition of private health insurance. And her response was just, let's do it. Let's get beyond that, which is a damning clip. It's a Medicare for all is extremely unpopular. So that's who she is. And I don't see any signs to date, and granted, it's been 72 hours, that she is moving toward the center or is going to have a new moderate persona. She's there to energize the base, and she's doing exactly that.
And she's getting a huge assist on her extremely left-wing record by the media already. Most notably, Ms. Border Czar. We're now being told by a lot of mainstream media outlets, oh, she was never in charge of the border. This is another right-wing conspiracy theory that she was ever in charge. There are headlines that say Biden appoints her border czar. She obviously has, as Matt says, she's the most left-wing senator to the left of Bernie Sanders. And the challenge will be to rebrand herself on those domestic policy issues. And it's going to be tough. They've already, I think it's a Trump PAC, or someone's released an anti-Kamala ad already, which begins with dark imagery and her cackle off in the distance, and all it is clips of her saying all of these things that Matt has pointed out. Get rid of private health insurance. I'm for the Green New Deal. We should have an open border. Nobody who crosses the border should be considered criminal. Every single point that a moderate centrist voter who might be a little bit undecided is not going to like. So how she distanced herself from that when she's on the record over and over doing that, to say nothing of her career as a prosecutor, which angers her left flank. They don't like how she behaved as a prosecutor. She was putting African-American men in prison for very small violations of, marijuana laws that they don't think should exist. So she's got a challenge here.
Okay, I've got another point, which is I saw David Axelrod saying she was never border czar. I don't know if you know this, but czar is not an official title in the United States. There is no such thing as a czar. We don't have czars. Russia had czars. They were the totalitarian rulers of Russia.
It means portfolio.
It means that there is some kind of interagency.
Bill Bennett was the first czar, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
But he was the drug czar. I'm still trying to be Czarina. No, you guys won't let me.
Simon was the energy czar. It just means that there's an issue that crosses cabinet agencies, and that somebody is supposed to coordinate at a higher level. And by the way, it never works. Like, that's what the drug czar's office that I worked for very briefly under Bill Bennett demonstrated. There is no such thing. You can't do it. Everyone has statutory authority but the czar. And so the czar can't make anybody do anything. But she was the borders. The czar is the unofficial term we use to describe the person who has said, okay, this is your remit, the border. Go do something. Remember, Biden was the cancer czar. He was going to do the cancer moonshot. Like, it's a PR thing. And to actually try to make a fact check out of whether or not she was named czar, we don't have czars. So it's a hilarious reverse Orwellian thing to do to try to make the case that she wasn't put in charge of the border. Biden said, I'm going to put her in charge of the border. Didn't mean anything by it. He was just like trying to get through a news cycle or something when he did it. Doesn't mean that the American people weren't told that she was supposed to deal with it. And that had she dealt with it, let's just say, for the sake of argument, she had come in really seriously, committed 10 people to it, and come up with a border policy, and they implemented it, and that it had some success, that she wouldn't be walking away with the election because of it. So she could have done it. She didn't, because she didn't do anything as vice president except give these oracular speeches in, Marianne Williamson Argot about unburdened by what has yet to not be.
That's not fair to Marianne. I just have to say.
Okay.
No.
Anyway, I just think this is a. But so the question is.
Well, this gets to your activities on the social media past 48 hours too, because you've been engaging in these arguments over basically things that Kamala Harris was proud to call herself up to 48 hours ago. And now, if you call her these things, you are cast aside, you are haram, you are outside the realm of legitimate opinion. If she was tasked with the border, if you recall, in 21, Biden said she would be in charge of securing the border. But within weeks, when Vice President Harris realized she would be unable to do that, they changed her role to investigating the root causes of migration, which I don't know if she ever found out what those were. But so she was aware of the political danger of that at the time. Yeah. But it's all on tape. All of this is on tape. That's the funny thing. It's all on tape, and it's going to show up in ads. And to think that it won't, it is kind of bizarre. And the other thing, of course, is Biden literally said in 2020 he was going to pick a woman vice president. Yeah, that is what he said. Yeah. And so now it is racist and sexist to say that she is a DEI pick. Yeah. Okay. A diversity, equity, and inclusion pick. Whatever. The point is, Biden said it. That's why she's on the ticket. It's because of her identity as a woman. And yet we can't, no one can ever point that out again if they want to remain in public life.
It is a fantastic Gordian knot that they are tying. DEI is good. The liberal radical imagination, DEI is good. It's a way of evening up cultural injustices and systematic racist unfairnesses. And it's important because diversity is a good in itself, provides role models to others, suggests to people that they can be whatever they want to be because there are existing models in positions of power who have been placed there in part to provide exactly this roadmap, right? So Biden says, I'm picking a woman. Jim Clyburn says, after Biden picks Harris, that Jim Clyburn, the man who saved the Biden campaign by, winning him South Carolina after he lost New Hampshire and Iowa, says you got to pick a black woman. So he picks a black woman. He tries to get all the possible credit for picking a black woman. Now, we would have said 40 years ago, 50 years ago, if you were really tough, before DEI existed, you would have said, she's a token. She's being picked is she the most able person ever? No, she was being picked for her identity. They believe in this. They believe in identitarian politics, the people who support DEI. So yes, you referenced an argument that I had on Twitter yesterday with Jane Coaston of the New York Times, who was saying it's racist to call her a DEI hire. Now, I think it's not right to call her a DEI hire because she wasn't hired, right? She was chosen as a political nominee, and then they won the ticket and she became vice president. That's not, she works at a company and there are 3 candidates and you pick the one who is a black woman And that's actually, maybe depending on the job, might actually be unconstitutional, but whatever, it's fine. You're supposed to do it. And they say, people like Jane Coast and others say, this is fair. If you pick J.D. Vance, who's a white guy from Ohio, you're doing so because of his white identity. So why can't you pick her for her identity? Everything is identity. Therefore, condemning somebody on the basis that they were chosen on for their identity is racist. And I'm sorry, you don't get to have it both ways. If you say that it is important to judge by race and count by race, then when somebody says you're counting by race, you don't get to say, you're not allowed to say you're counting by race.
We just, in one fell swoop, we just went back in time. And now we're back in 2016. How dare you criticize Hillary Clinton? What a sexist you are. Don't you believe in equal opportunity for women? We're back in 2016 when Obama was president. How dare you criticize Barack Obama, our first black president? This is going to be the rest of the election. You know, the issue with this response, and I agree, I don't think people should dwell on it because there's a whole panoply of issues to actually talk about and to criticize Kamala Harris on her positions. But people are driven crazy by liberals telling them that they are sexist and racist. They are driven crazy by it.
By the way, this is how she got to this position. I mean, if you remember, the Biden Harris tension during the election, for the brief time that she was in the election, was all about the race card.
Joe, right?
Was all about the race card. Joe Biden was a racist. So this was all kind of cooked up in her sort of accusatory worldview here to begin with.
But she's also such setting aside race and sex, she's so hugely unlikable as a candidate. She's evidently a terrible boss. The turnover rate in her office, both as a senator and as vice president, has been massive. And
92% of the people who have been employed by Kamala Harris since the beginning of the administration have left her employed. Do you know?
They used to call her the devil in the Senate. That was her nickname among her staff.
I worked in a White House. I've written books about 2 White Houses. Do you know how much people generally love working in the White House at the secondary level? It is the honor of their lives. They're walking around the corridors of power. You have to be a monster beyond belief to have someone say, I'm getting the hell out of here. This place is horrible.
They're trying to rebrand even that aspect of her personality as some like cool hip thing. This is the brat thing. You guys have heard her. She's like, oh, she's brat, which is like some woman who's a little uncomfortable, a little messy. She likes to party. She says dumb things sometimes. It's this whole, which you look at Kamala Harris, like, first of all, this is not what you want to be arguing about yourself if you're going to be the leader of the free world. But secondarily, she's not cool. Like, she's not the party girl. And so they're desperately trying to take all of her negatives and either pretend they didn't happen, like the border stuff, or rebrand them as positives. And this is a woman who's had multiple political rebrandings. None of them have stuck because we see her when she opens her mouth. And this is going to be their challenge when she's not doing a rally where she's got a teleprompter and a script. When she has to go off the teleprompter, she becomes the Kamala we all sort of know and dislike.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, Christine, because I put on MSNBC and
oh, don't do that.
She's in love. People are in love with her.
Kamala mania.
She's got a twinkle in her eye. You got Eric Swalwell coming down the steps of the Capitol drinking out of a coconut in reference to some meme that relates to her. She's just amazing. She's unbelievable. And I cannot believe, I'm personally offended at the things that I'm hearing from this podcast. It is offensive.
I'm a self-hating woman. I can't.
Look, this is a fantastic exchange because it gets to this question of, has she reset the race in the Democrats' favor, or are people on a sugar high? And I think arguments can be made in both directions, and I'm not sure which I think is the case. I think, as Abe said, Biden's trajectory was only down. There was no way for Biden to recapture, to move up. I mean, the only way for him to move up would have been for Trump to, strangle a baby on a stage or something like that. Like he had no capacity to reverse not only the narrative about him, but the facts about him. So in that sense, the fact that he is no longer there, as Mark Leibovich of The Atlantic put it brilliantly, he's like, the entire Democratic Party is acting like it just passed a kidney stone. If you ever had a kidney stone, you know the exhilaration, relief, and kind of high that you're on when it finally comes out. It is the most painful thing that a man can ever go through, and it happens, and you are basically, you have endorphins rushing through your body for 24 hours.
It's the closest thing men get to childbirth.
Right, exactly.
Just chime in there.
Right. So that's why I said men, not women. And so, you have this bizarre exhilaration just because you've been in pain for weeks and very little can be done about it except to take, opiates. But of course, you get back to stasis at some point. You forget that you were in pain and the endorphin surge lowers, and then you're just normally where you are. So is it the passing of a kidney stone and the relief in the aftermath of the passing of a kidney stone? Or are we getting to a point at which the 2024 election should always have been the most controversial person in American politics running for this term after claiming that the last election was stolen, having been part of, in some either indirect or direct fashion, this effort to blast through the Capitol and change the results of the electoral count, a person who destroyed his party's chances of controlling the Senate in his temper tantrum after the 2020 election, and whose candidate selection process in 2022 kept the Senate in the hands of the Democrats and also, denied the Republicans a real surge in the House. It is normal for that guy to not be running very well because of everything that you could throw at him, including everything else. And he was running in a way defying the negatives and starting to breach that ceiling that he seemed to have at 47%. If this has now been reset so that he no longer has his best issue, which is Biden, is this just now going to be a conventional race in which Democrats get 45% as a base? They can count on that. It doesn't matter who's running. Republicans get 45% as a base. Same thing. We're at parity. We're at ideological and partisan parity. And now it's just, where do those 10% go? Where are they? Do you thread the needle in the Rust Belt states? Do you pick up, I think as Matt said, do you try to go somehow with a black vote in North Carolina and Georgia and other places? Do you go to Arizona and Nevada with Mark Kelly? Do you go for a national pick, which Mark Kelly could be because he's an astronaut and a war hero and his wife was nearly killed by an assassin and all of that?
Well, I mean, I think the answer to your question, John, is we just don't know because we're still in the endorphin phase.
Well, but how can we're not allowed to say we don't know?
Well,
you're listening. You're supposed to know.
We just have to wait and see is the truth. I mean, this first round of polling that's come out in the past couple of days doesn't quite capture the whole of the switcheroo that's happened in the last 72 hours. What it shows is it's a more competitive race. It's still within the margin of error. Trump is still ahead in every poll except the Reuters poll, where he's behind by 2 points, and neither candidate breaks 45%, which is pretty weird.
It's 44-42, which is
right.
Not a real poll.
That's not a real poll.
3 months before the election, and there's
something weird about that poll.
14% undecided.
I agree. But the other polls, there's a Numeris poll that comes out that shows Trump with a 1 point lead nationally. What we're seeing is that the Democratic base is excited. We're seeing another thing, too, which is that the media is now on the Democrat side in a way it really wasn't. It definitely wasn't for most of the early summer after the debate. But the media was, kind of never really gung-ho about Biden in the way that they were for Obama. And I think our friend Mark Halperin often makes a point that Republicans rarely win when the media is not on their side. So in 2016, the media was pretty critical of Hillary. That's what made liberals so angry, right? All the reporting into the Clinton Foundation and such. And then in 2024, the media was beginning to really get under the hood about Biden's age. And then once the debate happened, of course, the media was pushing for Biden to leave because he was a threat to the Democrats' chances. So what we have now is just wall-to-wall coverage that's positive for Kamala Harris, as we've been saying. Does that maintain itself? I mean, this is the argument that Abe and I have been having all week. We just don't know. We're just going to have to kind of wait and see. But I also believe, too, was the problem Biden, or was the problem the Biden economy? Was the problem Biden's age and senility, or was the problem that prices have gone up by about 20% since this administration took office, or that the border continues to be a mess, or that the world is on fire, or that these weird stories about crime in the cities and people are becoming concerned about crime? If those other things are still there, and so you have a plausible message for Donald Trump to make, and I think to win, but there's no doubt, I think she does make the race more competitive for sure.
Yeah, I think she's in pretty good shape. I'm standing by my position that she will be protected for a very long time in a very aggressive way. For as long as that's in place, she's in good shape. The problem was certainly in part Biden. I mean, I agree, Matt, that the policies of the administration and the economic realities of the past of the Biden years are another problem. But at least the Biden problem is gone, and he set the bar so low for, while there wasn't wild enthusiasm for him among Democrats, among millions of Democrats who are like, yeah, everything he says is a tongue twister, and yes, he's not walking right, and yes, but of course I'm going to vote for him. When you set the bar that low, now you have Kamala come out, who speaks in word salad, doesn't know anything, but you can understand what she says. She may not confuse one world leader for another.
Right. Can I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it just occurs to me as you're saying that the Biden problem is removed. It's not really removed. He intends to be the president through the remainder of his term. We'll see if that actually happens. Right. But I'm just thinking about recent history. It's very rare for a sitting president to turn over the White House to his vice president. And approval ratings matter quite a bit here. W, of course, had a approval rating only slightly lower now than Biden's approval rating. And the Republicans were unable to carry the 2008 election, of course. In 2000, paradoxically, Clinton's personal job approval rating was high, but his personal approval rating was low. And as try as he might, Gore could not quite escape the fallout from the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And so we had a very close election, but W still won. The transfer
in 88, important counterexample is Reagan was at 60% approval the day that Bush got 54% in the polls. On election day. So and Reagan wasn't running. Right.
If Biden's at 35% in November, and the prices are still there, and this is why I'm a bad pundit, because there's so much at work here right now. I will just say this finally. I really think these next few weeks are critical, because we're in this weird space where the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party is undefined 3 weeks out from the Democratic Party's convention. That is not, we don't really have experience with this before. Right. You define yourself as a candidate during the primaries. Typically, a successful candidate has a base of support as part of a movement. Kamala Harris has nothing. She has no base of support. She's not part of a movement. She, as you say, Abe, speaks well and she's an attractive woman and she's there and, her voice is kind of warm. That's it. So right now we're going to have to define who she is.
Okay, so there are two advantages there, advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage to Harris, the disadvantage to Trump. So Harris is a known and unknown quantity, and therefore, as is the case with potentially successful candidates, has a Rorschach test quality about her that she will want to maintain. And people do understand this, that to the extent that she can be as much all things to all people as she can possibly be between now and then, she will try to be that. And it is Trump's challenge and the challenge of the Trump campaign to not allow that to happen, to define her, as they say, to define her as a border dove, as somebody who supported violent protests, who supported false claims of, incendiary false claims of rape intended to heat up and cause riots in Chicago by Jussie Smollett, who was just seeking to get a better financial deal from his TV show, all on and on and on. Define her, define her, define her. She does not want to be defined. The problem for Trump is that Trump would also, in an ordinary context, have to be defining himself. And, if he weren't an ex-president running for office again, he too would be in the process of introducing himself to the American people and defining himself and trying to pick and choose the way, oh, look, like Mitt Romney did. Look, there was a kid worked for my company, and the dad and the kid disappeared, and the entire company I turned over to find the kid who had disappeared, and wasn't that wonderful of me, and all of that. Well, Trump is the most defined person in the history of the planet Earth. He's got nothing. He can't introduce himself. There's nothing for him to. The one chance he had to reintroduce himself, which was the speech at the convention, I think we can now see was even more of a disaster than we thought at first, because he could have been the guy who survived the assassination attempt and has a new lease on life if he had stopped speaking at 35 minutes. But then he was like, no, I'm not changed at all. I'm exactly the same person I was. Take me or leave me. So he's defined, she's not defined. That's an opportunity for him with her, because he can define her, particularly if she runs away from what she's done. But he is very defined. And I want to say two more things about this. One, the Vance pick was a mistake. I'm going to tell you why the Vance pick was. I don't like Vance's politics, and I don't like his isolationism, and I don't like the way he talks about stuff. That is not why it's a mistake. This one clip that somebody found on the Tucker Carlson show is why the Vance pick was a mistake, where he falls into this conversational trap with Tucker, where talking about the question of childlessness and the country in which people are having fewer children, he basically says that, there's going to be two kinds of people with kids and crazy cat ladies. Now, if there had been an actual vetting process for the vice presidency by a serious person who digs through everything and does the oppo work that they know the other team is going to do to find out what the negatives are, and therefore say, look, there's this and there's that. And then somebody says, this clip is going to be worth $50 million. This one piece of footage is going to be worth $50 million. And this is a gold mine. This is a gold mine with people that we need to vote for us. Those crazy cat ladies aren't necessarily Democrats. But they could get very offended. And the childless, many people, the entire Bible, the story in the Hebrew Bible is a story of women who have difficulty having children. Go through the entire, this is a civilizational, emotional problem for all civilizations, whether they are now, whatever, Sarah and Abraham, over and over and over again, this is a thing. And so to push that button, somebody would say, he's just not ready yet. He's not ready. He's 39. He went on Tucker. He said something stupid, but it's too risky.
Well,
it's too risky to have that piece out there. And Trump is indisciplined, and he listened to his son, and he listened to Tucker. He listened to his son, who allowed himself to be on a bill with Candace Owens, America's foremost anti-Semite and Jew hater and Holocaust denier. Friday, Donald Trump Jr. was going to be at an event with Candace Owens. Like, so what that tells me is this campaign up to now was ready for prime time. And they got loose and they slackened because they started feeling overconfident and they're not checking their work.
They dropped Candace Owens. We should just
they did drop. Yeah,
they did drop Candace Owens, but I mean that shouldn't have happened. It's crazy.
So the thing about Vance, though, that is also it shows that the way Trump's campaign is being run is in some ways accepting a reality and then doubling down on it. And that's the gender divide right now. Republicans have a huge gender divide. And our Matt and My's colleague, Daniel Cox, has written a lot about this and studied all the data. It's getting worse and worse, but particularly for younger people. Women ages 18 to 30 are 30 points more liberal on most polling issues than their male counterparts, their generational male. In that generation, the young women, and those are that's the cat ladies he's talking about in this condescending way. But Republicans of the future will need their votes. And this is, and then you have the slightly older women, the kind of ones who do have young children. They have never warmed to Trump, but he does, again, in some of these swing states, need their votes. They've doubled down on not even pursuing that. And I think Vance has zero appeal to those women. I mean, he just doesn't. He's not appealing. His family is appealing. He personally, when he opens his mouth, not so appealing.
I wrote about the comment at the time 3 years ago, and ended my relationship with JD Vance as a result. But it's worth noting he never made a similar comment. I don't think he ever said it again. But there's no doubt that just as the Democrats are trying to define Harris and positively, they're also trying to define Vance. And so typically that's who we have a fight over in the summer, defining the national profile of the Veep nominees. Now we're going to have 3 fights because it's Harris, Vance, and whoever Kamala chooses as her vice president. That's why I just say so much is up in the air right now. And just to kind of final point on
put a bow on it.
Cat lady, put a bow on it. Thank you, John. My cliches escape me. I'm not clear to me they even knew about that clip.
Right. They didn't. That's what I'm saying. You know why they didn't? Because they didn't have a vetting process. They did not have a vetting process. That is like a very serious thing that campaigns do. And you know what the vetting process is and why we're not going to hear who Kamala's choice is for a while? Because that's what you're looking for.
Well, I think we have to know
the one quote that somebody said in 1997.
But Trump's attitude toward all this is none of it matters. LOL. I'm going to do what I want. Mm-hmm. And he decided he wanted to go with Vance, and that's what we have. And he lost
the 18, 20, and 22 elections as a result. And it looked like he was a different kind of candidate. And then 2 weeks ago, they got crazy overconfident.
There's a lot of confidence when you're beating the guy, and then you have to retool a campaign for the new person. But I think that they're going to be able to do it. We don't think that Donald Trump is going to be able to start defining Kamala and attacking Harris in the same way he's attacked all of his opponents throughout the past decade. I mean, I feel as though we went from a period where the media was saying, look how overconfident the Republicans are, to the media saying, the Democrats have this in the bag. It's like 2008 all over again. I mean, of course, that's not the reality. It's things are never as good or as bad as they seem.
Are you calling me the media? Because all I'm saying is that we now have little.
I would never be so insulting to you.
I'm just saying we have pieces of data along the road that suggest that whom the gods destroy, they first make overconfident. The minute that they started talking about how they had 20 paths to victory, I had a cold flashback go down I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, Karl Rove saying, let's win California. And then...
Well, I agree. I think Harris should make the Trump campaign think twice about putting a lot of resources into Virginia, certainly until they see more data, because her back at her on the top of the ticket does, I think, create basically it resets the race to where it was before the debate,
Right.
where you have 7 states really in play, and that's the focus. And as you pointed out, it's a narrow, we are back to 50-50 politics, where for a while there, up to the debate and then the weeks after the debate, it looked like the Republicans could break out of the 50-50 politics we've been in. So that there's every reason the Trump campaign should be a little bit more modest in their ambition, at least for the next, I'd say, 6 weeks.
You know, I think, John, while you were talking about Vance, it occurred to me that it's also a bad pick because everything awful that can be said or known or considered about Trump has been done so. It's exhausted. And not only did we get to the end of that exhaustion, he even started conducting himself in ways that looked undeniably admirable and brave and heroic. Then you pick up Vance, who has, from a liberal media perspective, a lot of villain potential all on his own now, right? He's a scary populist. He says these wacky things. He doesn't like Ukraine. They can whip up a whole new file on a new evil Republican here.
Well, let's stipulate that whomever Trump would have chosen be getting some version of this treatment.
But I think it would be
right.
A heavier lift with, say, Burgum.
Might have been, although you don't know that. You don't know whether, like Burgum's company fired somebody with cancer 20 years ago. I mean, that's what
But come on, you can't paint that guy as a villain. Am I right, Matt?
I'm still bereft.
I know.
That he's
I'm just saying.
presidential
you cannot assume. You cannot assume. Look, Mark Kelly, who is a astronaut and he's a good campaigner, he's a good speaker. You know, he survived, he's won 2 close elections in a tough state for Republicans, blah, 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 blah. Mark Kelly, whom the great mentioner that I am hearing among Democrats say is unambiguously the best possible choice, seems to have a daughter problem. He's got a daughter who's up on social media talking about drugs and things like that. And so if in fact I'm not being, gaslighted and it's not really her, if it is her, and it seems to be her, the Harris team has got to decide whether or not the risk is worth the reward. And ordinarily, do no harm would be your fundamental choice in a vice president. Because every time we've seen someone do something slightly out of the box, sometimes it's, when Bush was like, well, I got to pick somebody young and dynamic. I'm going to pick this young senator from Indiana. And apparently nobody ever heard him speak before he got up, and Dan Quayle, and made this horrible opening appearance that he never escaped in 4.5 years until he left. And he was basically out of American politics the minute that he stepped in it. No one ever even thought about him as a major candidate after 92. He had been vice president for 4 years. Do no harm. So they haven't done the work. They didn't do the work with Vance. And I'm telling you right now, the Democrats are going to do the work. Same question. Fundamentally, Josh Shapiro should be the choice, maybe. Won by 9 points. Very attractive, good speaker, has handled complicated situations in his state with grace and clarity. But he's a Jew. And he's a Jew. Lieberman was Jew. That was fine. He's in a party that is having very complicated relations and feelings about Israel. Bibi Netanyahu's coming today. The relations and feelings are so complicated that Kamala Harris is not going to be sitting in the chamber when the Prime Minister of Israel gives a speech to Congress, nor will many Democrats. Is the risk worth the reward?
And Biden is supposedly addressing the country at the same time.
No. Bibi's speaking at 2.
Bibi's at 2.
That's what I read earlier.
Biden's at 8. The press conference is at the same time. The White House press conference. Karine Jean-Pierre is giving her press conference.
I take it back.
Okay, so anyway, can we talk a little about Bibi coming? So Bibi's coming, and he is going to say that our enemy is your enemy. He's going to say the Houthis fired at us. It's like they fired at you. Iran is coming after you. Iran is coming after us. Does it matter what he says? Is this an important message to be delivering? Is this really only for Mike Johnson to satisfy Mary Adelson and for Bibi to speak to his own people at home? Is this a political moment that matters in the United States?
I think it matters that Vice President Harris isn't presiding over the joint session of Congress. That's ridiculous.
Literally her only job. That's literally the job.
She's the president of the United States Senate. That's what the vice president is for. And she's known about this for some time. She chose not to do it. She's going to a sorority meeting to rally the vote, rally support. And it's disgusting. I find it disgusting. And it shows you the problems of anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel in the Democratic Party. So I think it's a huge political moment. And I think people should be watching. I assume also Bibi will talk about anti-Semitism in the West and maybe even in the United States and how we have to fight it. And that'll be important. And he also is now bested Churchill's record for speeches to joint sessions of Congress. Churchill gave 3. This will be Bibi's 4th.
I'm not saying it's not important. It's deeply important to me. It's deeply important to people for whom this is a primary issue. And it is very meaningful that she is not attending and that a bunch of other senators are not attending. It is meaningful that Mike Johnson had to issue a letter threatening members of the House with arrest should they try to disrupt the speech, because now he has basically, JVP, SJP members of Congress who would like nothing better than to be Medea Benjamin in robes that he has to worry about. And that's bad. And it's bad. It's a horrible sign about America and where we stand on these matters that should be unimpeachable and bipartisan. I just wonder whether it has any effect with, again, we're now down to 10% of the electorate is going to decide this election. That's the thing we have to get our heads around.
Go ahead. Kamala will get away with this. This will not be held against her in any noticeable way. Certain people will try to make the important deal out of it that it is, but largely she's just starting out her campaign. She doesn't need to go near this. She's got complicated feelings. Let's hear what he has to say, and she won't. She'll be protected.
What is important here is that this is the first step on the path of how she handles one of the 2 most important issues in foreign policy. How is she going to handle America's relation to Israel and the condition that the war that Iran is waging through proxies on Israel and on shipping in the Red Sea and elsewhere? This is one of the 3. Let's say 3. There's Ukraine and there's China. Those are the only foreign policy issues that matter. She wants to talk about NATO. She can talk about NATO till the cows come home. Nobody cares about NATO except isolationists in the United States who don't like NATO. How she talks about this is the meat and heart of the matter of whether or not this election will turn on policy at all, aside from the economy and crime, right? This is it. And so this is not a good, this as a first step, I don't think is good for her if you want her to win, because she is already staking out a pretty radical position that says, I do not recognize the legitimacy of the elected leader of one of America's closest allies because I don't like his politics. I always lose it, but it's like my rabbi deciding not to say the prayer for the state of Israel because he doesn't like the makeup of Bibi's government.
I just want to observe that today is Rashida Tlaib's birthday. And so I think it's a great gift to have Bibi come and talk to the American people about the strength of the alliance. That's my birthday wish for Congresswoman Tlaib.
By the way, we should note, because we haven't had a chance to note before, that Cori Bush, squad member, St. Louis, Congresswoman, down 17 points to her Democratic rival in an election that, unlike the Jamal Bowman, George Latimer election, only implicitly turns on Israel because it's not a Jewish district. It's turning on her radicalism. And man, if she goes down and Bowman goes down, I don't know what the meta message is for Kamala Harris as she runs for president, but you could look at that and say, we've now had tests of how far you should go on this. I better swing way to the center. My question about her, and this is what we don't know, is she's never had to swing to the center in her life, except when she entered politics and chose to go and be a prosecutor, because that's what I keep telling people. This is what in the early 2000s, if you had political ambitions, what you wanted to do when you were a Democrat was one of two things. You wanted to go into the military so that when you came out, you had military credentials. That was the Schumer 2006, get Democrats elected to win the House back by having people in uniform run in your district. And the other was to be a prosecutor, so you could not be accused of being soft on crime, right? So that's the only time in her career that she sort of like positioned herself as I'm going to try to make and then when it was necessary for her to suddenly be on the side of revolutionary, fire-setting anarchist monsters in the wake of, George Floyd, that was fine. She joins kids. They bail out people who set fire to dollar stores and things like that. And she says that of the protests, this is where we are in America. This is how the emotion needs to be expressed about what happened in the 3 weeks after October 7th, when the people who were protesting were literally supporting Hamas. So I don't know that she can
She shows no sign of doing it. In fact, someone observed that in his campaign appearances, President Biden has been saying that he is eager to sign the codification of Roe v. Wade into law. In her speech yesterday, she dropped Roe v. Wade. And she said, when Congress restores reproductive freedoms, I look forward to putting that in law. In the sense, she's moving even more in a pro-choice direction by saying, forget about, all of the different trimester distinctions that the court drew in Roe. It will just be nationwide abortion on demand through a pregnancy, and as Trump pointed out in the debate, in some cases beyond.
Last point then, because I'm glad you brought this up, which is this is where the fingertip question of the Democratic Party and its understanding of America you have to question, which is they're on a sugar high about Dobbs and abortion. They think abortion is a net negative. It's probably right. Electorally, it was a net negative in 2022. That doesn't mean that the American people love abortion. American people still have complicated feelings about abortion, just like they have complicated feelings about childlessness. And if you want to commit to a radical position on abortion that nobody has ever really taken quite to the extent that you're taking it, you go right ahead. You're kind of protected in a way, the way Republicans were protected by Roe v. Wade, to say very extreme things, because actually those things weren't ever going to come to pass because Roe v. Wade was in place. You can now advocate anything in terms of legislative remedies to make sure that abortion on demand is something that Americans should have. But you probably shouldn't be making that argument as, how would you call it, like as unambiguously or as without limit as she is, because you don't want to trigger the discomfort that Americans have with this procedure that we know they had, and not just radical right-wingers who think that the body was ensouled, the minute that a zygote was created. very complicated issue, and generally speaking, you want to keep your powder dry.
Well, and Trump is now on the moderate. He's now on the more moderate
Right.
side of the issue by just saying it's up to the states. The federal government's not going to do anything about it.
Keeping it out of the platform at the convention.
Yeah, and that will be his line in the debate.
Christine, now that you're back from vacation, you had some time on vacation to relax and not have poofy hair because you were in a dry climate.
Wonderful.
I think you're also back with a commentary recommends.
I am, and I'm only slightly breaking the unspoken ban on me recommending anything that has to do with Japan, because there's a new show on Apple TV called Sunny, and I'm about, I think, 3 or 4 episodes in, and it stars, Sunny is the name of a very sophisticated home robot that was designed in part by a man who we see in flashbacks, who is the husband of an American woman played by Rashida Jones. Her name is Susie in the show. And I love Rashida Jones. I mean, she was great on Parks and Rec. People tend to see her in comic roles. She has quite a dramatic range. She did a great indie film called Celeste and Jesse Forever in I think the 2010s that I thought was wonderful, really perfect encapsulation of what happens when you outgrow your first love and how you deal with finding new relationships. She's great in that. So in this, she plays this sort of, it's very dark. You know, we first find her husband and son have been killed in a plane crash, and she's kind of piecing together what she didn't know about her husband, who told her he worked in refrigeration, but turns out to have been a roboticist, perhaps having some sort of side hustle with the Yakuza. So we get sort of all kinds of mystery, a little violence. It's not for young children. I want to put that out there. People think, oh, a cute robot movie. No. It's quite dark. But darkly comic. Much of what's interesting about it is she has zero tolerance for any of the traditions or rules and rituals of Japanese society. The show is set in Kyoto, so there's some beautiful shots of Kyoto. But she's just impatient with her Japanese mother-in-law. She's impatient with all these. She doesn't speak the language very well. It's the near future, so she has one of these devices in her ear that instantly translates things, but the show itself is in both Japanese and in English. And so far, I've just found it kind of fascinating. There's some interesting plot twists. I still don't know what's happening, but it's engaging. The episodes, I think, are about 30 minutes each. So far, I've found it quite entertaining. So I'm going to recommend Sunny on Apple TV.
Apple TV loves robots.
I know.
3 years ago, it made this.
I don't, so that's
Hanks
why I watched this.
movie.
We don't know if the robots, by the way, are good or bad in this show, which is kind of fun.
So they made this post-apocalyptic movie with Tom Hanks called Finch, about this guy. The world is coming apart, and he is teaching this robot how to be human. You don't really know why, and it's incredibly charming and lovable, the movie Finch. So that's actually, if you're going to go Apple TV plus robot, you not only have Sunny, but you have Finch, and that's of course 5 letters for both. So it's apparently robots, 1 word, 5 letters. The robot's name is Sunny. Finch is actually the name of Tom Hanks in Finch, so he's not the robot. But that's an interesting sidelight, is the obsession at Apple TV with the robot. Just occurred to me as you were talking. And Celeste and Jesse Forever is a wonderful, wonderful movie with Andy Samberg, also as her first love. Okay, we will be back tomorrow after the Biden and Bibi speeches to digest those. Till then, for Abe, Matt, and Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.